To be honest, I dreaded it and not looking forward to being in the services. But having been to Leeds, in fact, for the medical, to prove that I was fit enough to be in the services, I met with a group of similar-minded young men and found an immediate attachment with them. Having enlisted and moved off to Bedfordshire was okay. I think probably the worst thing initially was packing up all your civilian clothes, putting them in a suitcase and saying goodbye to them, because you didn't feel as if you belonged to anybody except the R.A.F. from that time on. It was quite a scary experience, especially being posted to Hennisford, which is on Cannock Chase, in a very remote part of Cannock Chase, to the square bashing camp for 6 or 8 weeks, I think it was, and you were treated just like an animal. You know, everything was you must, and the language was alien to me. Yes, it was a very enlightening experience, I put it that way. To be honest, the move at the end of training at Hednesford was from there down to Middle Wallop in Hampshire, which was a totally different atmosphere. You became a person again, and you felt as if you were learning something that was useful. Fighter plotting at that time seemed to have need of more people than other trades, and it was interesting to feel that you were in the R.A.F. and something to do with flying, not just pen pushing in an office. As I say, trade training, you became a person again, and people valued what you were doing and encouraged you, which was good. We travelled up overnight by train, arriving at Waverley. Yes, a mixture of young men. I think the majority of them were Londoners. And we arrived at Turnhouse very early morning and were greeted by somebody at the guard room who gave us shovels to go and clear the runway of snow, which was rather a surprise, if we put it that way. This name Barnton Quarry came up. It was very surprising actually to find that the bunker was in such a sort of derelict area, really in that woodland. But the intriguing bit, of course, was the tunnel, and how much and what there was down at the bottom of the tunnel. From the outside, nobody would guess that such a building was there. You know, having been through the basic training and trade training, this next level, you weren't sure how strict everything was, until he'd got used to it. You expected the worst and hoped for the best. And it worked out. It was quite a comfortable situation. You didn't feel under threat at all. One might have just ended up with a headset on, sitting at a plotting table, moving arrows around. And you could have possibly, if you didn't show initiative anyway, you could spend the rest of the 2 years just doing just that. But for one reason or some others, I seemed to be spotted and encouraged. So I actually didn't spend very much time actually doing fighter plotting, which was my trade, but was taken into the office department to work with the control executive and the air executive, which were on the second floor, overlooking the main floor. But it was amazing to think that there was all that under the ground. And so super, I mean, it was beautiful. It's such a shame that it was vandalised eventually and burnt out, and in the state that it was when you took over, shall we say. In the woodland area, there was the gate was in a different situation from where it is now. We decanted from the transport and we were obliged to march as a group into the quarry, to the guard rooms. There was always an R.A.F. police on duty, and they would do spot checks on identities. For some reason, I can only think it was for hygiene, we had to go into the filter plotting centre first to change shoes, because somebody had the idea you had to wear plimsolls all the time. So you went in there, you passed the guard twice so that he could, if he was feeling that way, he could pick you up on your uniform or ask who you are or whatever. Originally, the tunnel itself had sizable cocoa matting the whole length of it, which was absolutely filthy with the constant treading. But I can't remember just how long it was before that was taken away and the whole tunnel was fitted out with lino tiles with studs on, so that there was no skidding and it was quiet to walk on and much more hygienic, of course. But the whole tunnel was right down to the bottom, where you turn right at the bottom, and that was the sort of little showpiece where the R.A.F. badges and photographs of the commanding officers and whatnot were, a sort of welcoming area. It was very nice, actually.
And the fact that we've had over the last few days, lifted the roof, 50,000 estimated, and then we've got these kind of funds going up across the northern part of the country. We got a fairly good westerly gradient north of here, which will give us fairly good visibility on the east coast.
Just trying to think, I can't remember the actual first day of working down there, but I presume I must have been down on the floor level, plotting at one of the tables. The plotting actually was done with metallic metal arrows of 3 colours, red, yellow and blue. And according to the clock on the wall, every 2.5 minutes the colour was different. Everything had to change as the clock changed so that people up above would know how stale the information on the table was. If it was yellow but the clock had gone round to red, then they knew it was X minutes old and probably no longer any use. So it was just a rudimentary way, I think, of keeping up to date with progress on the tables. There was an art in the plotting itself because there were long metal rods with magnets on the end, and the arrow had to go on the end, and sometimes if you were on the big table the rods were so long that you had to have an assistant to put the arrow on for you because you couldn't possibly physically stretch. Every aircraft to begin with was always identified as hostile.
Target, followed by the time that you drop the box.
Until radar stations could confirm that actually it was an R.A.F plane doing an exercise.
If you abandon the primary target, you find that you decided to abandon the primary target.
There were 2 plotting tables. The bigger one was called the GSM, and that would have been on the right-hand side of the room, ground situation map. That covered the whole of Caledonian sector, western sector, northern sector, and even part of eastern sector on the map. So it was a much wider area. The smaller table was totally Caledonian sector, and that's where most of the plotting was done. The rest of it on the main table, of course, was it was there for a purpose, and if in wartime, of course, if there had been, then that would have been more useful. Generally speaking, the aircraft that we spotted and plotted were all on training flights. But they always sent their flight plans through by telephone, and up in the office we recorded them, so it helped with identification. If in doubt, of course, fighters were scrambled, and they were often scrambled actually. Even then Russians did fly in and around, but were soon identified and shoved off.
Right. So, can you remember how often it happened that fighters would be scrambled?
Oh, scrambling probably 2 or 3 times a week.
And
I would
was it
imagine
something that you found exciting when that happened, or was it?
Yes, it was up to a point, but at the same time, at the back of your mind, you probably knew it was going to be another rush, and they were going to be escorted out of the area. But there was always just that chance that maybe, maybe not.
And in fact, compared over the last few days, estimated, and then we've got these minor pumps going up.
Whereabouts in the bunker was your main workplace?
The second floor down, the middle of the balcony room, as we call it, facing where the totes were. They don't exist now, of course, they're not there, are they?
And in fact, compared over the last few days, estimated, and then we got these kind of funds going up. We got a fairly good vertical grading north, yeah, which will give us fairly good visibility on the east coast, but a fair amount of cloud as well, very pronounced cloud.
Compared with the work you were doing when you were in Hampshire, did you have to learn a lot more once you arrived at the bunker? Or?
I mean, obviously, at Middle Wallop, you didn't get any training for being an air executive's assistant. But it was simple enough. I mean, it was basically clerical work, recording from phone calls, passing it on to the actual air executive officer for him to, yes, say so, that's okay, or that isn't, you know. It was just another job that had to be done, but it was a responsible job.
180 good established on North 180.
And I do remember once, and I'm not just sort of blowing my own trumpet, but one night shift we were doing, for one reason or another, the controlling officer and I were the only ones on duty in that office because it was a skeleton crew, and he went off somewhere, and I suddenly got that feeling, I'm sitting here, I'm the only one in charge of Caledonian sector. Oh, you know, what do I do? It's only for a few minutes.
7-1, kill West Group, 33642. 24, 36,000.
180 good established on North 180.
And there was a Mayday call went out. There was an R.A.F. rescue helicopter from Lucas was delivering some Christmas goodies to the keepers on the Bell Rock Lighthouse, which is in the Firth of Forth.
Denver, departure United 328 Heavy Mayday aircraft just experienced engine failure, need a turn immediately.
For some unknown reason, the helicopter blade caught the lighthouse and it crashed, and the Mayday call went out. And we were listening in on all of this, you know, the conversations between the two.
Mayday, we have a smoke in the cabin.
And Seabird 59 Tango, just for my confirmation, you declared Mayday?
Seabird 59 Tango, Mayday declared incapacitated and very poorly pilot, so we need assistance on arrival.
And there was this awful feeling of what was going to happen and happened, thinking that you were listening to somebody's last words, and there's nothing you could do about it. And sadly, of course, the helicopter crew lost their lives over it. If you get on a low moment, you think about these things, and that's always going to be there, I think. For my sins, I got promotion, but with promotion always comes more responsibility. And that led to being a responsible person for security too. Especially when the bunker was not actually being used by service personnel. We had to do a week at a time in residence. We were allowed to go back to Turnhouse for lunch, but other than that we were there and had to patrol. But we used to get out into Edinburgh quite a lot, actually. And lots of walks in fine weather. I mean, some lovely walks. You could trespass on the railway at Turnhouse and get onto the riverbank and walk all the way down to Cranham. It was just like a weekend. Yes, you could relax. I was looking forward to the next stage of my training as a teacher, going to college. I'd sort of planned this, that this is what I wanted to do, teaching, so that was the next step. But at the same time, I suppose regretting that that time was over, because I really enjoyed it. In fact, I got out of the R.A.F. a few days early because of Barnton College. Should have been the 21st of September, but I got out on the 6th, I think. Because I think, you know, with hindsight now, possibly by 1956 things were running down at Barnton anyway, because it was going to change its role from being, you know, the radar had become so sophisticated that they didn't need that facility. And then, of course, it became the regional seat of government. It was changing its role completely. We weren't getting new recruits. Something was being planned, obviously. I'm just so sad that all that vandalism and fire and everything happened to it. But it's shaping up, isn't it?
Is that the first time you've been back at the bunker since 1956?
Yeah, that was the first time, and I'm so glad that I came, and glad that my daughter pushed me forward that day. And horrified when that man stepped forward and said, "We'd rather listen to you than Ben." Dear, I thought, ooh.
It must have been very nostalgic, I imagine.
It was, yes, it was strange actually, strange, very strange, yeah.